Vedantic teachings mean the end of all knowledge. Veda means scripture or knowledge. Anta means the end. It doesn't mean anything else we've learned is wrong, but it incorporates, it synthesizes all that we have learned in the area of knowledge, and then goes beyond. At some point in our search, our quest for truth, we will hear from somebody we trust that it's time to drop all knowledge, except the knowledge that you need to function in the world. But any knowledge that isn't absolutely necessary for your life, the Guru, the true Guru, will eventually tell you to put down. In fact, to stop reading in the hope that a book will give you that knowledge. Most of the books I read are of revolutionary teachers who, even if you're not ready to hear what they're saying, they tell you anyway. They're not afraid to lose you. And I guess my teacher, Sri Brahmananda, was one of those revolutionaries. One of the things I like so much about him is that he didn't care if there were 3 people in the room or 300 people in the room. He gave the same program. He never advertised, he never publicized. He didn't do anything to bring more people. And yet, even now, after he has left his body, more and more and more people are coming to the ashram in Monroe, New York. So are there any questions that you have about meditation? Or something that happened here, or witnessing? Yes. Has to be very loud, though. Yes. Good. An effortless observer does not concentrate. An effortless observer is aware of the truck going by, the sound of the horn of the cab, but then the next second a thought that comes in, and maybe someone sneezes, and maybe you get a feeling in your chest of some pulsation, but you let your attention move effortlessly from perception to perception. You don't focus anywhere unless you're using it as a device, focusing. When the mind is very agitated and won't let any relaxation occur, so that you find that's all you're looking at are these thoughts. In the beginning, if the mind is very restless, then you might just concentrate on something that grabs your attention. And that's why, if any of you or you are aware of that inner sound current, how many of you have heard like a sound such as the distant ringing of bells in your head? Raise your hand. Or sound of insects in the woods, or a high frequency sound. That is called the anahat nadam. It's always there, but it's particularly noticeable when our mind is fairly quiet. And that is used to focus on, concentrate on, when the mind is very restless, very anxious, going through some crisis. If you're not aware of that anahat nadam, which is called the unstruck sound, not heard by the ears, but through awareness, then do the effortless awareness, what we were doing just now. Allowing your attention the freedom to move to that sound. Look. Pressure on my arm. My toes feel warm. Sound next door. Remembrance of your face. Cool air on my cheek. Remembrance of my son. Phone call. Beach. Gabrielle. California, sound, warm feeling on my back. That's the flow of perception, you see? And that will give you the same result as focusing on a particular object. Because the point is that if you're involved in effortless observation or awareness, you cannot be thinking at the very same time. And it's only thinking, dwelling and projecting, which cause the tension, the anxiety, any negative reaction. Does that help? Sri Brahmananda, although he seemed very easygoing, I often thought that the stroke that he had a massive stroke, was due to the fact that he overworked his body and mind so much because he cared so much. In the early years when he lived at the ashram, he told people they could knock on his door 24 hours a day, which meant that some people in trouble knocked at his door 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning with a question, with a concern. And because he didn't really sleep the way we sleep, but he allowed the body to take rest, he was up in an instant and would sit with the person. He might not talk, but he would sit in silence so the person felt relief. And he continued that practice even when his body wasn't that strong. So on the physical plane, it might have been that he loved too much and gave of himself too much. His whole life was a sacrifice of his energy, of his time, of his sometimes peace of mind when he came down to deal with our problems. But one of the things that he was concerned about was that we would waste this incarnation by living selfishly, by living only concerned about our own lives or the lives of the people to whom we were attached, which was still selfish. Because he said, as you will hear, it's only when we live a universal life, an impersonal life, that we can break through our past conditioning and merit and earn a higher birth, a greater understanding, without any effort, just from having lived in a compassionate, sincere way. And this coming from a great scholar, someone who had all the knowledge. He was very hard on people who pretended to know. Very hard on people who could talk about meditation, but who did not live meditative lives. That's the big one. People who can talk about religion, but who were not able to have a religious mind. So if he begins to speak about Mahatma Gandhi as being a great soul, whatever you may have thought about Mahatma Gandhi, because some just called him a political saint, Sri Brahmananda knew Mahatma Gandhi, and this is what he says about him. Everyone knows that Mahatma Gandhi did not live for himself personally, but that he lived for the sake of others. That is to say, he neither lived for himself nor for his family members. Throughout his entire life, he lived for the sake of others. Mahatma Gandhi was a unique symbol of unity for all of humanity, including all religions, whether they were theistic or atheistic, whether they were Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, so on and so forth. In short, Mahatma Gandhi lived for the whole of existence. He was simple, he was honest, and he was straightforward. How many of you knew about the great fast that Mahatma Gandhi would go on, sometimes for months? He did that not to force the hand of the people around him. Some people misunderstood. Mahatma Gandhi was also a Vedantist. He assumed that if the people around him were out of order, it's because he was out of order. And that if he could make things right and orderly and sane within himself, then others would follow through. He really lived as if this were all a dream around him. It's as though sometimes I walk into the Blue Sky Center at the ashram, and it's a huge place. It seats 250 people. And I'll walk in and it's a bedlam. When Krishna Das was there, it was like a circus, because I walked in and people were happy and jubilant and dancing. One time Kamaniya was going with a hula hoop in the middle of the Blue Sky Center, and I had a serious program to give. So I came in, sat down, and even when I sat down in plain view of everyone, the hubbub didn't die down too much. So instinctively I knew to close my eyes and just go into my own state. And within 2 or 3 minutes, like magic, the room quieted down. Until I quieted, I could not transmit those waves of quiet. Somehow it happened. Mahatma Gandhi understood the same thing. He must be in order. He must be in a state of harmony for those around him to be in a similar state. Mahatma Gandhi never deviated from the path of truth, the path of ahimsa, nonviolence, the path of courtesy and nobility. Although he never considered anyone to be his enemy, yet there were many who considered him to be their enemy. He was never known to utter any harsh word, even to those who regarded him as their enemy. He was the first to do what he asked others to do. Even in the midst of shouting crowds, he was able to enjoy a sound sleep. As a matter of fact, Mahatma Gandhi was never alone. He was always surrounded by crowds of people. The only exception was when Mahatma Gandhi was in jail. And Gurdjieff says, fortunately, for his health's sake, for his mind's sake, he was more in jail than out of jail. Mahatma Gandhi liked to write. He liked to be alone. He liked to meditate. And so he went very willingly to jail, to prison, because that was his time to write and take rest. For most of his life, he was in jail, on and off. Mahatma Gandhi was also very economical. Now, only Guruji would know this if he were close to him. He said he could write very important world-shaking messages on the back of used scraps of paper. He was always ill and suffered from upset stomachs and digestion and indigestion. But his sicknesses never bothered him because he was extremely busy in the service of others. Mahatma Gandhi had a motherly heart. You know, every mother forgets her own difficulties when she sees the difficulties of her children. For the healing of his sicknesses, Gandhi always followed the laws of nature. That is to say, he was his own physician, following the treatment of nature's treatment. In the 20th century, he was a perfect model for the impersonal life, or the life of the universal I am. Actually, we can say that Gandhi was always in the state of universal I am, or Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness, Buddha consciousness, all the same. When you are living an impersonal life, then the whole universe of matter is your home. That came up in the meditation tonight. What they're saying, what Sri Brahmananda is saying, and what Gandhi was often saying, is that we think we occupy only this body, so that this body is our home. This mind represents our home. But once we become established in the art of witnessing, in the art of meditation, you actually feel that your body and all these bodies and this entire planet is sitting in the consciousness that you are. And that's the feeling you get sometimes when you're in a deep state of meditation and you feel that your consciousness and energy are spilling out and filling the whole infinite space. Has anyone in the room had that nice experience? Shana, raise your hand. Anyone else? When you feel that you're in the consciousness. Well, I hope you've had it, at least for a brief period of time, because that's what yoga is about. You can't call yourself students of yoga if you haven't tasted that even for 10 seconds. Because a real yogin knows the state of meditation. The definition of yoga is to yoke. That's where the word yoga came from the word yoke, like yoking two oxen. It's a yoke. Yoga means to yoke, to merge your consciousness and energy with the consciousness and energy of the whole universe and beyond. So these are words that will have no meaning for you unless you taste it, unless you feel you don't have any boundaries to this body. You're only temporarily in this body. Now, the personal life is like living in a hotel. When we live a personal life, that's like living in a hotel or a motel or renting a condominium apartment. When your renting time is over, you have to leave. In the same way, your personal body and mind can never be your permanent home, because these can be taken away from you anytime, once your karma is over for this particular family cycle. So therefore, you must have the whole universe for your family according to your karma. Any questions about that? You may want to listen a little more and then ask the question. Mother Nature is very kind because she always gives a warning far ahead of time. After you have passed the age of 40, doesn't apply to anyone here, right? But it will. After you have passed the age of 40, Mother Nature earnestly begins to give warnings in various ways. One warning in the form of family trouble. One warning, conflict with family members, conflict with members of society in the forms of various types of anxiety, as well as physical aches and pains, and all types of sicknesses and accidents. In fact, and by the way, this is coming from a medical doctor. Sri Brahmananda was Dr. Ramurti Mishra. He was a brain surgeon, a neurosurgeon. He's not speaking from empty experience. He's speaking from years of training and years of experience and years of performing autopsies and seeing what actually causes these sicknesses and illnesses. What is the number one cause of every illness and sickness? Stress, anxiety. That's why he took up neurosurgery. He was interested to know how meditation could affect the brain so that these illnesses would be held off. You will find that every year after the age of 40, newer and newer weaknesses emerge in you. After every decade, you will feel this degeneration and deterioration. And there's no need to visit any doctor to verify this. You yourself can feel this happening. But one of the reasons we love Sri Brahmananda so much is because after making that dire pronouncement, he tells us how to avoid becoming one of those victims of ignorance and wrong living. He tells us, don't worry, because Mother Nature loves you more than you love yourself. Therefore, she has more beautiful planning for you than you have for yourself. You are eternal, but your body has to die because your body was born. That which is born must die. This is the law of nature. Your body and mind are controlled perfectly by Mother Nature, and therefore you must not resist her laws. According to Sri Brahmananda, not according to me. According to not only Sri Brahmananda, according to Shankaracharya, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, Ramana Maharshi, I can name all the enlightened ones. They've all said the same thing. I tested them all. When I first met Sri Brahmananda, I really didn't believe a word he said. He told me that his guru lived on air and only ate occasionally, and that he was over 200 pounds and 6'3", and I saw photos of him when he was 95 and he left his body at 127, and I said, right, sure. I didn't believe anything. And then a lady came from India. She was the first woman judge in India. Her name was Dr. Kama. Lovely lady. And I asked her, did you know Sri Bhagavandus? You're from Bombay. And she was then about 65. She said, oh yes, I once gave him a ticket, but I canceled it. I said, what kind of a ticket? She said, a speeding ticket. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, he came into court. The person didn't know who he was. I recognized him because I had gone to his satsang. I said, how old was he then? She said, he was over 100. I said, how do you know? She said, I saw his license, his driver's license. I said, did you really give him? She said, no. I bowed down. I said, here is your ticket, but do not drive anymore because you don't know the speed you're going. But I was absolutely astounded that here was a woman judge, and Marvin's my witness, who said that she attended the darshan of Sri Bhagavandas when he was 115 or 120. So then I began to listen more carefully to these incredible stories of Sri Brahmananda. When the karmas of your body and mind are over, then you can live an impersonal life, like that of Mahatma Gandhi. Otherwise, after 60 years of age, you're going to have to suffer all sorts of physical pains and various forms of anxiety and neurosis. Listen to that last statement. When the karmas of your body and mind are over, then you can live an impersonal life. It could be turned around to read, when you live an impersonal life, that means the karma of your body and mind are over, because that means you're no longer identified with your body-mind entity. I'll give you that example I mentioned. How many of you were aware that multi-billionaire Warren Buffett gave what, 350 what? $37 billion he gave over to the Bill Gates and his wife Foundation. And he gave it to them because they're the most universal foundation. They help everybody. They help everywhere they can. And Warren Buffett said this. Two things. He was being interviewed. Marvin called me and he said, you have to hear this, Joan. Look at this man, what he did. Well, not only did I look at him, how many of you saw that interview? But the joy in that man. He looked about 12 years old. He was interrupting, he was giggling, he couldn't sit still in his chair. He was beside himself with joy. And then he said, when they asked his age, he said, I'm 75 years old, and I don't know why I'm in such excellent health, right? He said, I don't eat properly, I don't sleep, I put all kinds of stuff in this body, and I'm healthy. Our Sri Brahmananda would tell him, that's because he's not identified with that body, mind, with those senses. That he's just putting bad gasoline in the car, but he's not that car. Going to hear in a minute what living an impersonal life can do. But he is a perfect example of that. Now you take our other friend, and he is some aspect of ourselves. I don't know his first name, but the head of Enron, what was his name? Ken Lay. He was about to be sentenced in October for stealing money from all of us. And he was going to be given a life sentence because he did something knowingly. Going to go away for a very long time, and he was already 64, and his heart gave way today. So we have two examples. There was nothing wrong health-wise with this man, Ken Lay. I looked at pictures, he was quite robust, looked fine. But you can't take that stress. This other one, Warren Buffett, had no stress. In fact, he said his wife, Susie, was far ahead of him. He had to think and think which foundation. That was his only worry. He says Susie would have jumped and given away these billions long before he did, because she felt when people were totally sincere. She had met the Gates and loved them. He said she wanted to give that money away many years before. She was living through the heart directly. But those who knew this Warren Buffett said they had never seen him in such a state of joy. He said, it doesn't get better than this, giving away $37 billion. He said, what a thrill to work all your life and give it away. He was very happy doing that, and millions of people are going to be saved and live completely different lives because of that one gesture. Now, when the karmas of your body and mind are over, then you live an impersonal life. Or you can live an impersonal life when the karmas of your body and mind are over, like that an impersonal life like that of Mahatma Gandhi, because the body can have its karmas and its problems, and I'm sure that diet that Buffett was on would have killed an ordinary man, but he didn't live down here. He lived up here, always in search of new things to help people. And so when you live here, we were told by Sri Brahmananda, some mysterious force heals the body, allows the body to harmonize and assimilate everything that goes in there. And I can tell you that because this will bring many questions. Please don't ask questions about this. Just accept it as magic. I was there when Sri Brahmananda's body was cremated. And when his remains were removed from the furnace, they were placed on a copper plate, and they were pure white, like this dress, pure white, except for a red glow. The pelvic bone, everything was white, but glowing with this beautiful red heat. And we were just, in a state of shock. Afterwards, the mortician told us that that was not possible, that according to the science, there had to be some gray color, some blue color, some dark color in those remains, because morticians know that this color, this shade indicate this illness, that illness. There was no color other than white. And yet Sri Brahmananda had heart disease. He had 5 heart attacks, and he had a massive stroke. And we told the mortician, and he's sorry, not according to these remains. He said the only time remains are this white with no gradation of shade is in the case of a newborn infant where no disease has occurred. How that happens, I don't know, but you certainly know from your own experience. When you're doing good things and you're focused on other people and you're helping other people, are you less aware of the pain in your body or more aware? Of course you're less aware, because you're not focused on this. You're focused outside. And that's why people who spend their lives focusing on other people, concentrating on the needs of other people, rarely have lines of tension in their faces. You come sometimes to Ananda Ashram and look at some of the people there, and when they tell you they're 55 and 60 and 65, it's hard to believe, because they have been serving others. Living in an ashram gives us an opportunity to serve. Otherwise, if you do not learn to live that impersonal life, then after 60 years of age, you're going to have to suffer all sorts of physical pains and various forms of anxiety and neurosis. And here's one of Guruji's famous stories, which he loves so much. Once, a patient who was more than 70 years of age came to see his doctor for a physical checkup. After careful examination, the physician told the patient, "You're quite all right according to your age." The patient then said to the doctor, "I don't know what you're talking about. I cannot sleep more than 2 hours a night. I'm always feeling tired." The doctor said, "It's due to old age." The patient went on, "It's not only that, I'm always coughing, especially at night." Again, the doctor said, "It's nothing wrong. This coughing, it's due to old age, I know." The patient then said to the doctor, all right, but I cannot sleep, I cannot eat, I cannot digest anything. I'm feeling very weak because of this. Again, the doctor said, old age. Patient went on, but doctor, I can accept that. I'm not getting along with anyone. I'm very irritable, I'm very angry. Physician said, really don't worry. This is not unusual. This is due to your getting older. In this way, the interview between the patient and the doctor went on for a long time. Finally, the patient said, all right, answer this. I don't even like my religion anymore because the priest is repeating the same thing again and again. And I don't like the world I'm living in. I don't like the social condition, the national, international condition. Everything is bothering me. So I have to tell you, I'm drinking a lot and smoking and running away from all my problems. The doctor was quiet for a moment. He says, you know what I'm going to tell you. This is due to old age. It's not unusual. The patient looked at him and said, listen to me. After I drink a lot and after I smoke all day, I become very ill, physically and mentally. And after taking any kind of medicine, I find that that medicine upsets me in even a worse way. I can't even take medication. The doctor replied, well, never mind that. Just continue to take the medication I've given you if you don't want to have further sicknesses. The patient then said, you're not listening to me. I cannot take anything. I cannot take any medication because they not only make me sick, they give me this strange feeling as if I'm nothing. The doctor looked and he smiled. The patient went on and on, telling the physician his entire story, and the reply was always the same. It's due to old age. Finally, the patient stood up, and now he was furious. He shouted at the doctor, what do you think you're doing here? You think I'm going to give you money just for you to say it's due to old age? Who do you think you're talking to? What are you doing? The enraged patient was just about to strike the doctor when the doctor shouted, this is also due to old age. It's a doctor's favorite story. The moral of this story is that our personal life after the age of 60 must be transformed into the impersonal life. Now that's a must. Very seldom. I told you my guru was very easygoing. He didn't like to say anything was a must, but apparently he was starting to be worried in the 80s about all his disciples who were not changing, who were obviously on their way to repeating all the sorrow and suffering that they had had during this incarnation. So he says, after the age of 60, our personal life, especially after the age of 60, I would begin now if I were you, because I met Sri Brahmananda when I was 31, and I wasted about 10 years not trusting him, being very skeptical. He used to call me Joan Suval, FBI. Because although I wasn't saying anything, he thought I was watching him to catch him. You know, and he behaved differently with everybody. So I was watching him very careful, and he knew that. He was training me at the same time. But then all the teachings came together. I was reading all of them, and they were all saying the same thing, and they were sounding just like Sri Brahmananda. And he always told us, don't listen to what I say only. Listen to what I say and experiment with it and see if I'm not right. See if this is not your own experience. He didn't give any prescribed systems of meditation or systems of controlling the mind. He didn't do it. I think that he would have lost many of his people if he had tried to force. One of his favorite expressions was, no force. In the Gita, at the end, after Lord Krishna, who represents our highest self, says to Arjuna, representing the individual self, I've told you all you need to know. Now do as you please. Do as you want. That's what's given to us. That's where our free will comes in. Now, the impersonal life means that everyone must live for the sake of others, as Mahatma Gandhi lived. The problems of our personal life are so great that it is as if we were carrying the Himalayan mountains on our heads, and no one has the power to do that. What is the meaning of headstand? What is your head? Your head represents the absolute I am. Your physical head is not your real head, but means the highest point of your beingness feels like your head, which if you looked at a chart in Sri Brahmananda's wonderful book, The Fundamentals of Yoga, he has a chart where the absolute awareness or absolute I am is the circle at the top of the chart, just symbolically. But we can think of this point, the Sahasraram, the highest chakra, as our highest point of consciousness. That's our real head. As the Hridayam, the heart center, is not the physical heart, but the center of our being, the Hridayam, the heart center. So this head, that's the meaning of the headstand, is a different head. Your physical head is not your real head. When you meditate on the sense of I am beyond the body and mind, then you can carry not only the Himalayan mountains on your head, but you'll be able to carry the entire world as Mahatma Gandhi did. Your mind will become like a lotus flower. When you sit cross-legged in yoga, this is not really what is meant by the lotus position or the lotus flower. This is the physical lotus flower. The mental lotus flower is that mind which no one can disturb. One side of the lotus flower is open. That's the side facing the sun. But the other side is the root of the lotus flower, deeply embedded in the mud of the lake. In this example, the sun, S-U-N, represents the I am, that is to say, pure awareness, beyond the body and mind. This lotus flower expands in the presence of the sun and contracts in the presence of darkness. The presence of the sun represents pure consciousness, and the darkness of the night represents the thinking mind, or the state of ignorance. Just let these words be soaked in the way a lotus root would absorb it. The thinking mind, unless it's thinking necessary thoughts, really represents the darkness, the ignorance of the night. Now, why is the lotus flower so significant? Remember, the title of this essay, I'm almost finished, is the impersonal life versus the personal life, or the personal life versus the impersonal life. Why is the lotus flower so significant? This flower resides in water. Its blossom always faces the sun, while its roots are in the mud of the lake. When we have materialistic thoughts, worldly thoughts, they're like the water. And the thoughts about the material world are like the mud of the lake. I am, or the sense of I am, whenever we're feeling in that state of I amness, beyond the body and mind, in the witnessing state, I am, the sense of I am, beyond the body and mind, is like the sun. Therefore, our mind should be like that lotus flower, always. We should have this image of the lotus flower. When your life is transformed into the impersonal life, then and only then will you understand the significance of the lotus flower, the lotus pose, and the headstand in yoga. Otherwise not. And when you meditate on the sense of I am, the way we did when we were in that state of pure awareness, effortless awareness, when you meditate in that way, not concentrating, but being in the state of the witness, when you meditate on I am beyond the body and mind, or you live witnessing throughout your day, then you will have automatic, natural, and spontaneous healing. And in that way, you will overcome all the aches and pains of your body in the same way as Mahatma Gandhi did. I assure you, I knew him, Gurji says, that there is no one who had pain in his body as much as Mahatma Gandhi. But he was extremely happy. And this is because he lived the impersonal life. That is to say, he lived a life of the universal I am, not the personal I am. May truth, this is a blessing that Gurji conferred at the end of this essay, which he wrote in Honolulu. I took the dictation for it. Honolulu, Hawaii, March 11th, 1986. He blessed us in the end by saying, may truth, nonviolence, and waves of compassion be always kindled in your heart. Kindled means kept alive. And we kindle that. I'm going to save you about 6 questions by saying this. We kindle the waves of compassion by remaining in our true form, our true state, beyond the body and mind, beyond the thinking mind, beyond the ambition, beyond the resistance, beyond the jealousy, by being in the witnessing state as much as possible. That's the practice that he left with us, which is part of the scriptures, part of the Gita. It's the easy way. And I love the fact that he said, who can guess why I love that he said, may the waves of compassion be kindled in your heart. Where was he? He was in Honolulu, and he was meditating on the ocean every morning. And so he was very much connected to the waves. Guruji could sit for hours just looking out. He didn't look at the waves. He looked at the horizon always. We looked at the waves. He looked beyond where the earth and the sky met.